All right, we're back, and let's talk a little bit about structure building. And this kind of builds off of that story grammars idea that I left off in the last segment talking about. There are three processes involved in structure building in written works. Or I would like to just keep repeating. This stuff applies to like plays and movies also. All right, so laying a foundation would be, when we're introducing a new topic, right? So you have to sort of, as a writer, so that the reader can comprehend it better, lay out this new topic in a way that is going to be transparent to the reader. And so you might need to give some definitions of words that you're using, or you might need to introduce the characters, or you might need to give some context, right? Like this is laying the foundation. Then there's the mapping part, which is where you use the world and you use the linguistic knowledge that the reader might have to relate new information to information that's already been encoded. So for you as a reader, you can use mapping to help you to tie new information to your existing linguistic knowledge, your existing knowledge about how the world works, so that what you're reading relates to what you already know. And this is an effortful process. A lot of times as students, we don't really want to do the effortful process. And, we kind of would rather have that kind of memory disorder where everything goes in without any effort. Like that'd be awesome, but that's not awesome. Your memory would be a mess if you did that. But we don't really want to put the effort into imposing our existing knowledge onto what we're consuming. And so when we read our textbooks, we oftentimes, highlight everything because we can't really figure out what's important and what's not. We don't focus on just maybe what's new in a textbook. We highlight even things that we already knew those concepts because maybe we took a related class or something like that. And so we're already familiar with that. You should focus on the new parts, right? You already have the foundation for that existing thing. So go ahead and move to mapping and try and tie the new parts to your existing knowledge structure. Like that makes more sense. Don't waste your time repeating stuff you already know, right? And this takes effort for you to sort through what you already know and what you don't know. As you go along in your higher education, you start doing this a lot more naturally. You'll start to do this mapping process with a lot less effort. And then you can start focusing on shifting. So shifting is when, you have this foundation of knowledge, you've mapped information onto it and things, but you're starting to realize, okay, I'm starting to understand this material well enough, or I'm starting to become enough of an expert on this topic that I'm starting to realize there's actually a nuanced separation where I need to shift over and say, okay, this is a separate subject. The current foundation, if I'm going at a very shallow level, I could say that this stuff goes together. But honestly, I'm starting to really understand this well enough to say I need to start like a new foundation, a new structure to map this new information onto. So shifting occurs when you've got a certain amount of competence. And, writers can lead you through this where they can lay the foundation for you. They can map the content for you by giving you good relevant world examples or reminding you back to something that they introduced earlier, so that you can say, okay, you already know this part, so let me add on to that a little bit. They can even do some shifting for you where they're saying, okay, so now we talked before about this broad concept. Now I'm going to try and show you that actually you can divide it into two parts, and it's really, so like writers can really lead you down the processes of structure building. But what I really like to encourage you guys to think about as students is about the act of imposing your own mapping, recognizing when shifting is required, so that you can start to build independent, novel concepts where you're like, really starting to understand the material that you're encountering. The more classes you have within a certain subject, the more likely it is that you can start imposing this kind of organization. So it's not uncommon for college students to not really start displaying their own mapping and shifting on their content courses until they're like juniors and seniors in college, because they have enough content under their belt that they can really start doing these processes. But I just really want to encourage you that learning is a very active process. And so you really need to think about it like that, whether you're in an in-phase face-to-face class or you're in an online class, you should always be expecting to do your own reading, do your own integrating, tying the lecture to the textbook in your own way. That's how you really become super competent in the topics that you're studying. All right, some individual differences. Callender and McDaniel did a study that focused on learners who naturally structure material versus learners who don't. And what they found is that those learners who naturally impose structure and do those steps naturally, the mapping and the shifting especially, tend to be the kinds of learners who remember material really well. What writers can do for those learners who don't naturally do their own structuring and shifting, their own mapping and shifting, is to include embedded questions in the text. And you're going to notice in your college textbooks, almost all of them are doing these embedded questions now. So, you've done some reading on overconfidence, and then you see down there the retrieval practice. Why, after friends start dating, do we often feel like we knew that they were meant to be together, right? Like, quiz yourself on the concept that you just read about in, this overconfidence section. If you recognize in yourself that you're a natural, structurer, that you do a lot of the mapping, and you do a lot of the shifting on your own, and you naturally have like really good study habits. Again, my daughter was a great example of that. She was a way better studier in college than I ever was. She would rewrite everything. She would read the textbook and then she would actually take notes on it. I didn't do any of that stuff in college. She was a way better student than I was. My son and I are a lot more alike in the sense that we mostly attended class and we would read a little bit, but not a lot. And so neither one of us were stellar college students. I was a much better graduate student, I can tell you that. But if you know that you're more in the, like my daughter's category, you probably should just read the textbook, do your own thing that you already naturally know how to do. The thing that's working for you, do that, right? Like if it's working for you, do that. If you know about yourself that you tend to be kind of more like I tend to be, which is, you might read it, but then maybe not really thoroughly be processing, not really be tying it to what you already know. If you're not taking that extra leap on your own, then take advantage of those embedded questions and actually think about them and try to think, why would they ask me this after I just read this section on overconfidence? Like, what does this have to do with? And really let the writer help you to impose that kind of structure and do your own, mapping and shifting taking their lead. And that'll really help you to store material and retrieve material better in your classes. So that's my little pep talk on that subject. Now I'm going to leave you with this last item in our playlist, being this piece on speed reading, because a lot of times people want to read a lot faster, and whether you're trying to go for speed reading like this person's talking about, or you just want to boost your reading speed, people wonder, do speed reading techniques really work? And I can tell you, no, they don't really. And the textbook will explain a little bit about how comprehension tends to be really low among those who have acquired information through a speed reading strategy. In case you're not really familiar with the concept of speed reading, it was really popular in like the 70s and into the early 80s. There were like these Evelyn Wood speed reading courses that you could take that were supposed to help you. My uncle took that. He swore by it. He completely believed that he could speed read. I'm really skeptical that you can actually comprehend information that's processed the way that these speed reading courses encourage you to do. But if you're curious about it and you'd like to try it, I thought it would be fun to include this video for you at the end of the playlist. So, all right, well, that concludes chapter 10. Hopefully I've encouraged you with some study tips, and I will see you for our wrap up in, we got chapter 11 and 12 coming up. So I'll see you there.